And you spent thousands of hours in the wind tunnel in order to ensure that the downforce on the MC20 was sufficient for the vehicle without adding a spoiler. This is the completely new format to some extent, especially for Maserati.
Yeah, you know what? It was very clear in the beginning that we wanted to try to work without a spoiler. Number one, it's visual noise. There's a space for a spoiler when you really go track and you do a track car, etc. But for a Grand Touring supercar, we wanted to remain as pure as possible. So we try to avoid the spoiler as an add-on piece. And secondary, if you do a moving spoiler, which we could have done to hide it while you're driving it, it adds weight and it compromises the space of your luggage compartment. So also that was not a good idea. So instead what we did, exactly what you did, what you say, is to be almost real-time designing the car with the aerodynamicists in Modena. Actually, wind tunnel, yes, but these days is actually all artificial. The computer does that for us until the final check in the physical wind tunnel. And so we did the car real time with aerodynamics, and that allowed us to design the car like a wing. If you, for example, I'll give you one interesting detail. If you look at the section of the wheel arches, normally they are very sculpted, they're peaking, they're round. On the MC20, they're not completely flat, but they're more flat than round. And so even the surface of the wheel arches creates downforce by being basically a wing surface.
When you think about the future and where the industry is going, it is undeniable that the electric vehicle movement is picking up speed, if you will. You drive, or at least you did drive, a Gran Cabrio with a naturally aspirated V8. And you love the sound of a morning cold start with a V8. Who doesn't, right? But you did something interesting as you started to examine how EVs would change design and change product development. You challenged yourselves with an interesting exercise. You took a video of a 1954 Pininfarina designed A6 GCS, you say the most beautiful Maserati ever put together, driving through the streets of Italy. You muted the engine sound and played classical music. And what came to mind when you did that?
Goosebumps. It was literally goosebumps. And it was this eureka moment of the future is going to be great. And mind you, this exercise I did exactly when I arrived at Maserati, because at that time, it was clear for us designers who live in the future that this will come. We didn't know at what speed and with exact every little consequence. But it wasn't done last year or 2 years ago. It was done 7 years ago. Because there was this challenge about what if, which we didn't know at that time, we would go electric. What if sound, the engine sound would go away? Electric cars still produce some sound that you have to do for legal reasons. So we did this exercise. But you know what? The interesting thing was, while the video looked great with the original sound, I would argue it almost looked more emotional without the sound of the car, because suddenly you over-amplify the visual impact of the car. I don't want to make advertisement, but there's a fantastic TV show where all characters, a few chosen, are blind. And I struggled first with the concept of the show, but once I got into it, the show did an excellent job of telling the world through the, well, I almost said through the eyes, but through the ears of someone who's only dependent on sound. And it was fascinating. And so we did it the other way around. We basically created something that now going forward will almost exclusively depend on visual. So what you need to do is you need to remind yourself then in the conversations with engineering and packaging, etc., we need to make sure that we maintain this aspect of rolling sculpture, which means we need to have amazing proportion, we need to have amazing design. And I would add, if you allow me, I would add one more anecdote to it. When we had the lockdowns, one of the many lockdowns here in Italy during the pandemic, streets became silent. And suddenly, when you would hear a high horsepower car, like, for example, my Gran Cabrio, which I still own and will always own, announcing itself from 5 minutes away, I started to ask myself, is this something that will be accepted beyond car fanatics? I'm not so sure it will be, to be honest. And I think you will earn much more respect if you almost enter the scene silently. So I'm absolutely optimistic about that aspect.